Today, my guest on the Growth Lead podcast is Bryan Rucklos. He's the Senior Director of Growth Marketing at Outdoorsy. Outdoorsy, for all you outdoorsy folks, is obviously a main stop, is a well-known name. And Bryan, thanks for being on the show, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Caleb.
Let's give the audience a bit of an understanding on where it started and how you got to today as a marketer and as a marketing leader. What has been your career growth story?
Sure. So I entered marketing on the agency side at a company called Rakuten, which maybe you're familiar with. I started, given my math background in college, really in the media buying space, very focused on a book of business across dozens of clients. It was a client-facing role that allowed me to understand how many different businesses thought about performance and the different KPIs they were changing. And then I had the opportunity to move in-house at Ancestry. There I joined in a channel lead role, again, within paid media, mostly focused on paid social, content marketing, and display. And after a few years there and within the boom of consumer DNA, I had the opportunity to move to the brand media side of the house, where I was obviously operating and dealing with very different goals and KPIs, very different way of operating, much more strategic planning focused and much less day-to-day optimizations and constantly adjusting campaigns. And then I moved to Pinterest, where my role was actually split between driving consumer growth as well as focusing on advertiser growth. So my first foray into B2B marketing. And there I was very specifically focused on paid media, again, on a paid social side. Pandemic happened, like everyone was kind of looking for a change after being stuck inside doing the same Groundhog Day type.
Yeah, on the bike behind you.
On the bike, yeah, I was a sucker for being one of the many pandemic Peloton joined.
Oh, that's funny.
But and Pinterest candidly was doing so well from an organic growth as everyone was stuck home doing DIY projects, buying homes, diving into recipes, that our goals as a team really did slow down, right? And so I was looking for a new focus, was long looking to live and work abroad, found an opportunity at a company, very small company called Peanut, based out of London. It was really my first time being at such a small startup. And the beauty of the role was it allowed me to not only bring in-house all of our paid media and really build that out, but it allowed me to expand into areas of expertise that had usually been siloed off within larger organizations by their own specific teams. So it allowed me to get more understanding into life cycle and SEO and things of that nature that I'd interacted with, but never had been in charge of or owned.
Yeah.
And then, like you alluded to, about 2 years ago, I joined Outdoorsy. For those who don't know, Outdoorsy is a marketplace similar to Airbnb that connects peer-to-peer renters on the RV and campground side. And we also have an insurance business called Roamly. And we lastly own 3 campgrounds. So myself and my team actually oversee all 3 very different businesses in the growth marketing that supports those.
Wow, that's quite the journey. And I hate the term T-shaped marketer, but you've explored every nook and cranny there is, from agency side to client side, from brand to performance, like art and science, probably, certainly different organizational sizes and sort of bureaucracies perhaps that come with that. What is, over the course of your journey, what's one interesting thing you've learned about yourself that you now consider today as like your calling card as a marketing leader?
Yeah, I'd say, that narrative I just went through obviously has a lot of different stopping places. I really enjoy diving into new business challenges and also just exploring different types of businesses and verticals and different goals that they might have. So landing at a place like Outdoorsy that does have three very distinctly different businesses with their own challenges, and in some cases their own customer demographic.
Yeah.
Has really been a nice place to land because it's kept me highly engaged into new challenges every month, every quarter. And it is not so like cyclical in terms of, oh, it's Q4, this is what we do, this is the playbook. Something's constantly changing, and I think that's the exciting part about the company right now.
And so those business units, the seasonality and the kind of cyclical nature of that doesn't expose as much for you because they're layered different business units on top of each other.
Yeah. So one example would be like, not a lot of people camp in December, right? So maybe two of our businesses are slightly, in their down season, especially when it comes to marketing and our ability to drive bookings. However, the insurance business is far less seasonal. People need insurance always with a vehicle, whether it's parked or not. And so, that gives me the headspace of my team, the time to go and focus on different parts of the business as needed.
Got it. Fun fact: one of my earlier client partners was a company called Wheel Estate.
Okay.
And they were acquired by actually Rakuten. So that's interesting. There was a lot of perhaps consolidation.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I like to talk about a lot with marketing leaders is just this idea of team. So give us an understanding of what does your immediate team look like today in terms of size and sort of corresponding areas of expertise, and is it a balance of in-house and exit? Give us an understanding of your resourcing scenario.
Sure. Yeah, currently my team is made up of 6 people, with some layering in that. Some of my direct reports have members of their team. But the main 4 buckets I'd break it down to are paid media, life cycle and CRM, SEO, and then lastly, affiliates and partnerships.
Okay.
And for the most part, we're all in-house. We do have some consultants, especially on the SEO side of things externally, that we lean on pretty heavily and partner with on ongoing projects. But for the most part, it is in-house. And then we just deal directly with the different platforms or software vendors that we work with.
Great. For many companies, building and managing an A team in-house is no small feat, right? It's like, on one hand, you have to be the marketing leader with the vision and the guidance, but on the other hand, how do you find A players, hire them, coach them, train them, manage them, and then how do you retain them? Like, you are probably one of the few that have been able to crack this nut. How do you approach this idea of keeping that A team intact?
Yeah, I'd say a large percentage of my focus is on the team and their needs and also how engaged they are, right? Having been an IC for, a lot of my career, like many people, I know what I enjoyed. And I think I also understood what members of my team that valued different things in leadership, what they looked for. And so when I joined Outdoorsy, I really worked one-on-one to understand what are people's motivations, where do they want to be, are they driven by career growth and upward title trajectory, or is it compensation, or is it, they're still, young in their career and they're in one area, but they want to learn a lot more.
Right.
For me, I really wanted to learn a lot more about what other parts of marketing were so I could build that foundation to grow and lead a more diverse team. And I found that there are a number of people within the team that are very interested in doing exactly that. And it's kept them hungry and made them feel like they are growing, I believe.
Yeah.
And it's also, again, harping back to the fact that we do have different businesses. It's allowed them to explore different solutions for each. And I think that's kept things very fresh as well. But when it comes to finding talent, my philosophy is I go with people who are like motivated and hungry and have like the raw talent to be able to mold into.
Yeah.
Like, myself wouldn't be a lot of value if I couldn't guide team members or ask the smart questions to get them in the right direction or thinking in the right direction. So I think just finding people that are open to working together on challenges and wants to really lean in.
Yeah.
I find that that's like that trait that is, you could spend a lot of your time trying to get out of people if it isn't inherently there to begin with.
That's right. And I think you touch on something so interesting there that a lot of marketing, not a lot, but quite a few marketing leaders believe that, hey, unless I can pay them top dollar, I can't create stickiness. I can't create a culture. But like people are driven by other things. You rattle off 3 or 4 of them, like this idea that somebody is excited about where can their journey grow within this culture, or some people get bored. Some people need to be touching different things at multiple times. Some like, was that something that you learned because you were exposed to it in terms of what compels people and motivates people beyond just money, or how has that become such a fabric of your leadership style?
I think it's more around the open dialogue and pushing the members of the team to be like brutally honest. I think if you ask members of the team if they felt that they could be candid with me, I believe and I hope that they would say they absolutely could.
Yeah.
You know, I want them to be very transparent. I don't want any time there to be a surprise if someone says, "Hey, I'm leaving and this is why."
Yeah.
I don't ever want to be surprised by that. I really do want to ask the tough questions, and I quite frankly, I schedule it into our one-on-ones. If there's a light agenda, let's get rid of the whole agenda and let's just talk about where they're at, how their bandwidth is, checking in on really how engaged they are, and if there's anything I can do to help alleviate any pain points. You know, I also find that it's not always just what motivates them, but what is deflating to them as a marketer or as an individual. Right. You know, a lot of the times people want to see traction, they want to see momentum, and for one reason or another, they might not be able to achieve that on their own. And right. I think a big part of my job is getting those roadblocks out of the way and kind of raising the alarm bell as needed within the organization to get things moving forward and prioritized.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I want to join your team.
Well, yeah. Well, I'll let you know, Kev, if there's ever.
Oh yeah. I got a few plates in the air right now to be not responsible for me. Hey, so Bryan, right now as the marketing leader of your team and of this brand, what is just going really, really well? It could be a performance thing. What are you like? The team is pumped about. You're pumped about it. We are knocking out of the park in this area.
Yeah. So to start the year, we went through an exercise where we built out what we titled internally like a growth matrix.
Okay.
Essentially, it was just a diagram that outlined metrics that collectively laddered up to like a North Star. You know, on the outdoorsy side of things, it's bookings, right? And we said, okay, how do we get to bookings? And it's, you know, this times this, and it's ultimately like a calculation, and it has leaves that go about 4 tiers deep. It was a really good exercise because it brought in a lot of members of the team, cross-functional partners in analytics and product, et cetera, to really just look at our business in a simple framework and not get overly detailed and say, okay, as we look at this and all these KPIs, where do we think we're doing well just by glancing at a metric, and where are we bleeding from the neck? And that allowed us to become much more detailed in our prioritization. Yeah. And it allowed specific teams to go month after month, quarter after quarter, and focus on one rung of that matrix. And so what's been so successful is once we got that in place and we said, that's a metric we want to chase, let's come up with how many different ways we believe we can impact that metric across the different parts of the team. Yeah. And very quickly, each group, you know, came up with 5 or 6 hypotheses of how they could move that needle and what tests they'd put in place. That's awesome. From there and ever since, we've spent the last Yes, it's September at this point. The last 9 months, kind of consistently launching tests, identifying and diagnosing results, relaunching tests as needed. And yeah, we've failed a lot, sure, like
That's
throughout.
all it's all about.
But I think we've yet to fail at finding some sort of secondary hypothesis. And when we go back and test a secondary time, what we've found is our success rate is very high. And yeah, it's been tangible impact to the business where we can say, hey, this test alone over the next 12 months is going to drive this many incremental blank. And it's been very tangible for us as a team. These are not heavy lift tests in many instances. And I think it's been motivating to just see that, yes, we across very different disciplines can drive that North Star metric by just identifying and working on some that are 3-4 rungs away from really our ultimate goal.
That's awesome. You got to take that matrix and strip out all the outdoorsy proprietary stuff and maybe put a price tag on it and
Yeah.
put it out there. I'm pretty sure
sell it on Etsy or something. Yeah.
I want to emphasize two things out of this example, which I think are just so critically important for all marketing leaders to hear, which is the first one with this matrix. What it allows you to do based on what I'm hearing is that there's a lot of times where marketing teams will have their North Star business result or objective that they're trying to optimize for. And they'll do a bunch of random acts of marketing to achieve that, right? And when that thing isn't achieved, what do? They scrap it all and they start the cycle over. So you have this discontinuity cost of, but for you guys, out of 10 different rungs in your ladder or your matrix, maybe 1 or 2 of them are bleeding, but the other 8 are sound and they should be maintained and preserved, and we just hyper focus there. And so it allows you, I think, in my mind, based on what you share, to avoid this random acts of marketing thing, because it's like it's taking a big problem and breaking it into manageable hypotheses and scientific experiments.
Absolutely. I think that's been the key to your point. Yeah, if we're trying to drive bookings, the list be 100 long, and some of them may move some of these smaller KPIs, and you'll never see that North Star move. So it's been really helpful to break it down. And also it's helped us identify some of those KPIs that are really hard to move. And it's good to understand that and say, okay, not that we should abandon efforts to try and improve it.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a lot closer to its ceiling than these 3 over here.
Yeah.
And I'd be remiss if I didn't say, we worked with a longtime consultant of the business, Ken Rudin, to really build this process and then adapt it to make it our own. But he's really who came in and helped us work through this and identify this working method.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And that's awesome. You guys made it your own and sort of have become sort of tethered to it. It helps from an employee, from a team member standpoint too. You show up on Monday. What do I do today? Well, you can get zoned in on something you can drive impact on.
Yeah.
So Bryan, what about, like you told me when we first met, you told me one of the challenges that you experience, I think a lot of marketing leaders experience this, is, the group of investors will come in, or the board members, and say, well, where's the attribution, direct 100% attribution between everything you're doing today and how is it resulting in bookings? How is that showing up as a challenge today, and how do you think about it or navigate it?
Yeah. For us, I think it's building a really strong relationships with our analytics members. Within Outdoorsy, they actually sit within the finance team. So, when those questions do come through, it's nice to have buy-in and support from a team that's part of where those questions are coming from, right? Totally. So where I am now and where I've been always at different companies, I've always found this to be true. Like, marketing going off and running an experiment and maybe running a test of like 100K with a big media platform, and then saying, this is what they told us works and this is what we saw from it. Bringing that in-house and to showing that to your analytics team and your finance team, you're almost always met with a ton of questions, a lot of times ones that you didn't initially ask
Right.
of the vendor or the partner. So what I've found to be far more successful in a way of reducing friction in that conversation is bringing those members into the conversation before anything ever goes out the door.
Right.
Ensuring that we have full buy-in at like the enterprise level to say like, this is something that, fundamentally makes sense. We can gut check the metrics in our own way, and we have a way to incorporate it within our larger framework of attribution.
Yeah.
I think that's really key because oftentimes, these are people that have a lot of experience, maybe experience at places previously that have already tackled some of the challenges you're trying to face. Like,
Yeah.
hey, we want to work in podcasting, let's say.
Yeah.
Analytics members move around like marketing members do as well, right? They've seen how things can be done and are oftentimes very creative when it comes to their solutions for measurement, and can be really strong partners to lean on to help us do our jobs and expand and diversify our media at the same time, while knowing confidently what it's doing to the business, and
Right.
kind of stave off some of those questions, quite frankly, because we brought in the appropriate people up front.
You brought them in, and there's a sense of co-creation almost. Like people support what they put their thumbprint on. It's compared to like you come out with the end result, or you've spent all the media, and they're like,
yeah. And I'm curious, as if you've talked to, many other marketing leaders, like I'd suspect this is a challenge that many are facing with. And I mean, is my answer something that resonates across the other conversations you've had?
Totally. I mean, you get all sorts of answers. I think sometimes there's the group that is actually trying to create. They believe that there is an opportunity to create 100% attribution, and it can be done. And so but they'll do it in a vacuum, in a silo, and then show the results to the critical stakeholders that need to be involved. And I think there's another camp which you're in, pun intended, another camp intended, where it's like, let's validate all the assumptions and get on the same page and co-create the good news story, understanding it's going to be a combination of direct attribution and non-direct, but at least let's build this hypothesis and experiment together so that there's no surprises later, right? I think that's what I'm picking up. And Absolutely. So I love that. What from your perspective, as a marketing leader of this team and of this brand, what's your biggest challenge right now? The thing that keeps you up the most at night?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'd say how quickly the SEO landscape is changing. As a consumer, we've all seen how it's changed in very visible ways over the last year, where 3 years ago everyone was saying search is going to shift to voice, and because all of these in-home devices, and now everyone's talking about how generative AI is going to be really the big change, and you could see it very visibly when you put in any Google search now. At least majority of the time I'm getting an AI generated response, which is taking up a lot of the inventory that used to be ads first and then your organic rankings, right? Mm-hmm. And now things like that are getting pushed further and further down the page. And so that change is I think it's an exciting challenge, certainly, of how do we ensure that we're capitalizing on that. Mm-hmm. But we also have to recognize that the KPIs we used to score our organic search off of, and whether it was going in the right direction or the wrong direction, they've maybe changed.
Yeah.
You showing up and maybe your rankings even getting better, but right now your year over year click performance is falling off a cliff. Like that would keep up, I think, any marketer at night. And it's something we're actively trying to navigate. And quite frankly, I think it's brilliant by Google in the sense that the consumers love it, and it puts an even greater emphasis probably on that ad inventory,
Yeah,
given it's now
totally.
even further down the page. So you're going from one scroll to get to organic, rankings, to
Yeah,
now one scroll to get to paid, two scrolls to get down to organic. It's really something that I think we're all going to figure out over the next year, and what the best practices are. But it's probably, to me, it feels like one of the biggest shakeups
yeah,
in the last 3-4 years, certainly.
yeah. Do you think that in order to not allow this to keep you up at night, there needs to be a almost an erasing of your memory in terms of the ways things used to be, and a retreating back to, hey, maybe we need to establish, like maybe we need to go down to ground level benchmarking again, like create a whole new game to
Yeah,
compare against.
I think it's a really good point. I think benchmarking that channel against 12 months ago
Yeah,
is, not to give marketers around the world an out, but it's unfair to some extent, just due to all the change.
yeah,
I do think you need to start looking more near term to say, hey, what direction are we going? Are we improving? Are we falling further behind?
yeah,
Certainly, I think that's something that we need to be, as marketers, proactive about communicating to the business.
right.
Not everybody is living and breathing these changes and how they're impacting your business specifically.
Yeah,
So I think really, kind of, rather than sweeping it under the rug and say, oh, it's down, whatever, being very vocal about, hey, this is why X, Y, and Z, and there may be a new, future reality where this is not as it might not be as impactful to the business anymore. We're gonna have to find other avenues to make
that's
up
right.
that.
Yeah. And it's such a good topic you bring up because like I've never admittedly, and some people hate me for this, but I've never been a huge brand guy, but brand is now pretty critically important. Like you want to start seeing on your Google, on your analytics, like more direct search. Because like if we have to fight, like we know that since the dawn of time and will continue to be this case forever, intent is always a thing. Like everything is, in some businesses, product services are more intent driven than others, but like yours is very intent driven. So you can even either play in this game, this Wild West, establish new benchmarks, be empathetic to yourselves, but also brand is incredibly important. Like
Yeah,
outdoorsy.com is now very, very important than, renting an RV.
rental. Yeah. No, I think it's a really great point you make, and I think when we've had conversations about what's happened to organic search and all this upheaval, one of the things we've called out too is that within searches over the last year, Google has started to give more preference to nearby businesses
Right.
with brick and mortar addresses with Google business profiles, right?
Yeah.
And so that even too has become a whole section of the search results ahead of the ads, again, just pushing you further and further down the page. And for a peer-to-peer marketplace that does not have a countertop,
Yeah.
that poses a massive risk. And I
Yeah.
think, why you look at, and I have to hypothesize here, that someone like an Airbnb is not scrambling as much is because people don't search for vacation rentals, Los Angeles.
Yeah.
No, they're looking at Airbnb, to your point, and
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
they've become that product, and that,
Yeah. Kleenex. Yeah.
yeah, they've become the Band-Aid, right? And for us as Outdoorsy, it's going to become all the more important for us to solidify us as synonymous with RV rentals, so that we kind of bypass some of that localized search, and really, kind of grow that way. Couldn't agree more.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I want to go off course here and just kind of have you leave us with this. And it's a simple question, but what keeps you coming back every day? Like, what do you enjoy about this game? It is a game and it's a tough
Yeah.
game to play, but like, why do you keep doing it?
Yeah. I think for me, it's a lot of the channels I oversee and work on have such tangible results, right? It's they are very measurable by nature, and so for me, it's being really energized and driven by the data itself
Yeah.
and being able to see the impact of the work. Whenever we've run some of these dozens of tests over the last 9 months, like I've bookmarked and refreshed Mixpanel and Tableau 1,000 times on each test, probably to the point where it becomes obnoxious. But I'll be the first person to say data's in for yesterday. This is what it is, and it's refreshed maybe 2 minutes ago, right? So I think it's that natural curiosity to be able to see what's going on. I think where some parts of the business don't really get to see the fruits of their labor. Like our team and in our work is very fortunate in the sense that we get to see it sometimes within the same day.
Yeah.
And I think that's exciting for anyone who, ultimately is bought into the business and, what the business mission is and, what experiences we're driving for the customers.
Yeah.
And it's not just limited to Outdoorsy, on the insurance side of things as well. Like,
Right.
It's important to care about your products. And, I think at Outdoorsy, it's very easy for us to get bought into the 3 lines of businesses. And
Totally.
they're all ones that I ourselves too can enjoy as customers. So
Yeah, well, that's the best part. My parents go and they want to go camp because now they got grandkids, and so they go buy this giant RV. As like, that was the worst decision you could have ever made. Like, I mean, especially like when they don't have FU money to throw around, it's like,
sure,
you can try a different experience every time with something else, and
they're very expensive. They're expensive to insure, maintain, store, like all those things. And that's why I think, Outdoorsy is brilliant product market fit, certainly. And especially in like the US and Canada, where now that I work here, I can't help but see about 100 of them a day.
Yeah, that's right.
They're everywhere. They're truly everywhere. Yeah.
A lot of them are COVID decisions too.
Oh, without a doubt. Without a doubt.
I think one other thing I wanted to emphasize is that you talk about your passion. The reason why you're doing this is this unquenchable curiosity and the fulfillment that the data gives you, but also the way you described your team and your team leadership style. I feel like you're getting a lot of value out of just seeing people grow and having some hand in that. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. I've heard many times where like, oh, people management's like the worst, right? We have to do it. And I'm like, I actually really enjoy my team, and part of that's I've been able. I inherited a really great team to begin with when I joined. Everyone was someone that I could personally really get along with, really identify with. They're really strong leaders themselves, very good communicators. And then the people we have brought in and added have been really great fits within the dynamic of the team. And, I personally enjoy, seeing their wins, right? Their successes ultimately reflect well on
totally.
myself, the marketing department, et cetera. And so that's where I've chosen to really put a lot of my focus and time. But I can't speak highly enough of the team, not to allow anyone to go and try and poach them. But,
yeah. Well, listen, Bryan, I love the way you're playing the game, and it's very, very encouraging for other marketing leaders I know. And on one hand, there's a sense of admittance that we haven't got everything figured out. On the other hand, it's like, hey, I'm happy to share that this has been working out. But it gives a reminder that we're all in some sort of the same game, playing the same against the same rules. So, Bryan, I appreciate it. Great chatting with you.
Yeah, thank you, Caleb. I appreciate the time.